problem with the way that we approach student learning and education in the residence halls, in our student unions, in our spaces across campus. Because when I look at the way that we approach this, sometimes to me, it seems like we're working at random. Like we're throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. And I think there's a better way. In fact, I know that there's a better way. You see, when I was teaching in a higher education program for a number of years, I looked at the things that I did in the classroom. I looked at the syllabi that I constructed, I looked at the lesson plans that I wrote, and I thought, why aren't we using these same techniques in the ways that we approach student learning? And I wasn't the first person that thought of this. I'm certainly not the last to try to experiment with this. But about 10 years ago at the University of Delaware, Kathleen Kerr and Jim Tweedy began experimenting with curricular approaches in the classroom. And it was around that time that they began the ACPA Residential Curriculum Institute, something that's gone on for 12 years. And at this institute, we experiment with ways of approaching student learning through curricular techniques. And Kerr and Tweedy wrote about this about 10 years ago in an About Campus article in 2007. And in it, they described how they began this journey. They followed up on that About Campus article 10 years later, and we've learned a lot of things since then. We've learned a lot of concepts that are durable, that seem to work, and we see the effects of this on our campus. And in that article, they outlined some essential elements that make up this approach. In fact, there's 10. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these 10 today, but I am going to go through some of the concepts that I think that we can apply to all of our work in student affairs in a way that can enhance student learning in a much more intentional way. The first of these is to draw from what we know. We have scholars that look at this stuff, right? They study student learning. So why aren't we using that scholarship as the base of the way that we approach this enterprise? How we use student development theory and apply it. And also our own knowledge that we have on our own campuses. So the assessments that we do, the things that we know about our campus climate, and use that as our starting place for discussing student learning. Then identify our educational priorities, goals, outcomes, much like the cascade of a waterfall, getting more and more specific so that we can articulate this is what a student should leave the university with when they finish their 4, 5, or however many years it takes them. And it's not just about being specific, but we also have to recognize that student learning happens through time, that it's developmental, that it's sequential, that it builds. So how are we weaving through all the educational experiences that we provide on campus so that we're helping a student along that path? And how do we do this? Typically we talk about programs, right? Programs aren't the only way that we educate our students. And so I think we need to move beyond the glitter, beyond the bulletin board, beyond the program, and think about all the different ways that we intersect with a student on our daily campus. And once we do that, we can begin to construct purposeful educational activities. Educational activities that we then need to assess, that we need to measure, that we need to say, hey, are we doing this well or not? And if we're not, then we revise it or we let it go. And we need to use this assessment data to look back at our goals and outcomes and say, did we even pick the right ones to begin with? Or are they still the right ones now? And we're not alone. When I talked about the Residential Curriculum Institute, that's because this started in residence life. But the truth is that many campuses are doing this across entire divisions. That we have partners and stakeholders in this process that should all be working together towards furthering the goals and outcomes we set for our students. And so that is the way that I think we can begin to use some of the concepts that we've learned in the classroom and apply it in our own out-of-classroom context. Now, this model, which I've experimented with and played with and many of my colleagues have experimented with, I think is one of the best out there, or at least the best we've come upon yet. And it has many, many strengths to offer us. But there's another piece, besides just being intentional in our goals and outcomes and being able to enact those that I think is really important. And that is motivation. Now, if you think about an educational program, people often say the easiest way to get students to an educational program is to provide food, right? Now, I'm not saying that's not true and it doesn't work on some level at all, but I think we need to move beyond that to talk about how can we motivate our students to engage in the learning process outside the classroom in a way that is not just motivated by pizza. But what are some of the incentives that we can provide them so that when they come to our programs and services, they know what they will get. They will see how it connects to their lives, they will see how it connects to their future, and we'll see how it connects to the overall educational experience that they have. And so I think the next challenge for us, which is a little bit of a stretch beyond where we've been before, is how do we begin to certify the learning that we do outside the classroom? How can we actually say that a student has a skill, a competency, or knowledge, and they can actually put that on a co-curricular transcript, and that transcript won't just be a list of, here's the student organizations I was involved in, but here's the things that I can do. And so, as a student who loves Marcia Baxter Magolda, I inherently think of the Tandem Bicycle, right? The learning partnership, where the educator is in the back helping provide structure, helping provide some of that roadmap, while the student is in front steering in their own learning. And so I think this curricular approach is what we need to help students down this path. So whereas I started with a problem, I'm ending with a solution. And the solution I have is to look to our faculty colleagues, look at our folks in academic affairs, see what they're doing, and replicate some of those same processes in the work that we do. And there's a lot of us on this journey, through the Institute and through even many of the programs that you may have seen while you've been here. And I hope you will join us on that path. Thank you.